to win. Okay, so I've decided to give him a rematch, and I've played the Dutch defence, and my opponent is very rudely trying to hack me up here. He's played the Staunton Gambit, 2e4, against the Dutch defence. But I'm just going to try and give the... Oh, he's... Okay, he disconnected for a second there, but it's okay, he's back. So all I want to do here is give him back the pawn. I'm happy if he takes on f6, I'm going to let him do that and then take on e4. But my opponent so far doesn't seem to be interested. But why am I not a solid pawn up here? That's the question that I'm asking. Okay, so he's taken on f6. I have a couple of different ways of recapturing. Why not just take back with the e-pawn and now bring the bishop on f8 into the game? That seems to make sense here. Wow. Okay. This is either... I mean, I think he didn't want to just be a pawn down with me having a big centre, so he sacrificed a piece here. But surely he doesn't have enough. I have to be careful here because of bishop c6 check. Probably his piece sacrifice was a good idea, just because otherwise things were a bit difficult. I have to be a bit careful here. Somehow it's trickier than I thought it was going to be. And there goes all of my time, as usual. Can I go knight e5, queen takes e4? Let's try this. My idea is if queen takes e4, maybe I can play bishop f5. Try a little tactic here. But I've already used half of my time and we're only 12 moves into this game. So I have to be very, very careful. All I want to do, to be honest, for the moment is just survive for a couple of moves and be a piece up. Think I can play rook b8? I mean, he's got discovered checks with bishop f7 and bishop c6, but that's not the end of the world because I can recapture and defend the queen. So I've got a threat of my own for the first time almost of the game. I'm still a piece up here, but I can't say I'm very confident. Feeling the pressure of not having very much time. But what is he going to do here? I mean, f4 is the thing I've got to watch out for. Maybe I can be greedy and take this pawn off on f2 on the next go. Normally I don't like to grab pawns, but with the threat of f4, I feel like it's quite an important pawn for me to take off. The only problem I really have here is my king is caught in the centre of the board. And that is making it very, very difficult for me to consolidate the extra piece that I have. So my opponent's doing exactly the right thing. In fact, I'm a little bit concerned he might sacrifice an exchange with rook takes d6. That's exactly what he's done. This is definitely a hack attack game, but seems to be my opponent that's having all of the fun. If I take on e5, he goes rook d1 check, king c7, queen takes e5. That looks very, very nasty. Maybe I can play bishop f5, then knight c4 check. Wow, 46 seconds left. I do not know what to do here. Oh, I'm going to take a gamble that I'm not getting mated. If I come out of this with a win, I'm going to say right now that I've been lucky. I'm a rook and a piece up here, but am I getting mated? Looks like I am. If king c7, then queen e7 check, and after here he's got queen d5 check, king c7, and then queen c6 is mate. Well, that was a really nice game by my opponent. I mean, I've analysed a few wins that I had, earlier on. So I think I'll come back to this game a little bit later on, because this was very nice. But I'm just gonna try for some quick revenge against Kozchek, because he's a little bit lower rated than me, and I'd like to win a couple more games against him. But we're going to come back to that game later on and see if there was some way for me to defend against that, because he took advantage of my lack of time and my lack of calculation very, very well there. Okay, right, I must play faster in this game and not get checkmated. That is the challenge for this game. Okay, we had this Italian game earlier on where I tried a quick g4, and that works really well when they go h6, so I'm kind of waiting for him to play that move. If he doesn't go h6, then I'm just going to play this knight f1 round to g3 idea, and that's exactly what's happened. And now I'm expecting b5, then I'm going to try knight h4 and bring a knight into this f5 square. And the point was that after b5 he was threatening bishop c4, but now my queen can come to f3. This is exactly the point. And hopefully, despite the fact that things are going wrong over in the centre, a knight coming into f5 could be bad news for my opponent. But I'm just trying to slow down a little bit here. Make sure I'm not missing anything. Let's bring the knight into f5. I might be threatening something like knight takes g7 here. The point is that if king takes g7, bishop h6 check, king takes h6, queen takes f6 is mate, because the king can't go to h5, the knight's got that cut off. So after knight takes g7, king takes bishop h6, the king would have to go back, and then queen takes f6 would be very strong. Except the king can go forward to g6. This could happen. After king g6, is there some way I can finish the game off? Maybe h4 with a big threat of h5, and then queen g4, h5, king takes, queen takes there. Is that winning? Well, I mean, okay, the way he mated me in the last game was embarrassing, so I'm gonna go all out for this attack. And bishop h6, and just desperately hoping for some revenge. I mean, I might have overlooked something here. I'm really hoping not. I mean, after king g6, I've also got knight f5, just with the idea of swinging the queen across to g3 and giving mate in that way. So I'm expecting king g6. Is there a defence after king g6, h4? The threat is h5. h4, knight g4. I've got a minute and a half to make up my mind here. h4, knight g4. Where's the finish in that position? I don't see it. I don't see it. Maybe there's something, but what about knight f5 instead? Threatening queen g3 across. That looks much better. Okay, time to play that and see if my opponent has some kind of defense. I mean, maybe he can move the knight and try and run his king via f6, but I feel very dubious that that can survive for very long. Well, he's gone pawn takes c3, but can't I go queen g3 here? I mean, he has to play knight g4, and then queen takes g4. Oh well, king h5, queen g5 is mate. Well, that makes me feel a little bit better about getting mated in the middle of the board in the last game. That's a little bit more like it. Let's give this guy one more game, and then I think what we'll do is after this game we'll take a very, very quick break, and then I'll come back and analyse these two games that we've just had. One with my opponent checkmating me, and then this little game here with some revenge. Is he? Is he up for one more game, or has he disappeared? Okay, he seems to have gone. Okay, actually we won't take a break here. Let's just go back and analyse these two games. Let's start off with this one, just while it's fresh in my memory. So we had an Italian game, just some standard moves of theory here. H3. I like to play as flexibly early on as possible. So in going H3, the idea is to stop the knight on F6 coming to G4, and if he goes H6, which we saw in an earlier game, in not exactly this position but something similar, then I can consider the move G4, and the idea is that with the pawn on H6 I can go G5 and leave her open his king side, open up some lines against his king on G8. So that's one of the ideas of H3. Obviously I've still got the option of castling kingside here. And thirdly, the idea of going knight F1 and bringing the knight round to G3, or possibly E3, but normally G3 in this line. So I was just trying to keep options open. So we saw Queen E7, Queen E2, Bishop E6, and given that I'm trying to get an attacker on the king side, I want to keep as many pieces on the board as possible. So that's why I brought the bishop back to C2 here. It's not doing a lot at the moment, trapped behind these two pawns, but if things open up, then the bishop is pointing down towards the black king. Okay, so rook D8, and now we see the knight coming round to G3. This is its natural square, and this is one of the advantages of delaying castling, is that obviously the knight can go straight from F1 to G3 without me needing to castle and play rook E1 first to vacate the F1 square. Okay, and then he took on E4 and played pawn to B5. And this is a very standard position for the line, and the idea of B5 is that he's threatening bishop C4, and that would hit my queen on E2, which would actually be trapped, because his rook covers all of the D line, and the queen can't go to E3 because of the bishop on C5. But it's a very standard idea, and the normal response is to go knight H4, just freeing up a square for the queen on F3, and preparing to bring the knight into F5. So then he hit the queen with bishop C4, queen F3, but my suspicion is that white is doing well in this position, because a knight is going to land on F5, hitting the queen, and I'm threatening all sorts of nasty things down on G7. But things aren't so bad here. I kind of think that his queen should go to E6, so that he's covering F6 here. Now after knight H5, knight from H4 to F5, his queen on E6 is protecting the knight on F6, so I have fewer tactics here. The only downside possibly is that this bishop on C4 is now a bit short on squares. But my feeling is he should play something like this. And maybe now pawn to B4. This is probably how he should do it. But the way it happened in the game, after queen D7, and the knight jumps into F5, now I think there's a big threat of knight takes G7. And maybe this position is still absolutely fine for black, but he has to spot this threat and bring the knight back to E8, which is kind of going backwards for the time being, but it keeps everything nice and solid. And if black has time to go F6, then his position is actually completely okay. But you know, I can play knight H5 here, for example, and my position is full of cheapos here. For example, I'm threatening knight takes G7 here, and if he recaptures with the knight, then I have knight into F6, forking the queen on D7 and king on G8. But maybe he can go F6 here, and it's just a game. I mean, I don't think white's necessarily any better here. Ooh, just gone back a few too many moves there, sorry about that. So yeah, I was just talking about queen to e6 here. And actually I was talking about knight back to e8, and I'm certain that this is the crucial move in the game. He has to spot that I've got all kinds of nasty threats, like knight takes g7, and knight h6 check, and bishop h6, and bishop g5. And knight e8 is just based on preventing all of those kind of problems. But my opponent carried on instead with pawn to b4 here, ignoring all of that. And then after knight takes g7, his position falls apart. I mean, okay, he doesn't have to take the knight, but if he doesn't take it, then I've taken his main defence in front of his king, and his king's wide open. And my other knight's coming into f5, and the bishop's coming to h6. So I don't envisage black surviving for very long here. So the only real thing to do is to take that off. King takes g7. But now bishop h6 check. And the point is here that if king takes h6, queen f6 is mate, because the king is trapped. If the king instead runs back to g8, I mean if it goes to h8 then f6 drops with check, and if he goes back to g8 then simply queen takes f6, and it's going to be mate on g7. I mean, okay, so he could play bishop takes f2 here, or queen d2 check, but he's losing a bunch of pieces and it's still all going wrong. So I guess black would have to resign here. So the only move after bishop h6 that makes any sense is king forward to g6. And now I was considering the move pawn to h4, with the idea of h5 just forcing him to take on h6, and then queen takes f6 as mate. But I was worried here that he could play knight g4, and now the point is that if I go h5, king takes h6, then I can no longer obviously put a queen on f6. So this didn't seem so clear to me. Maybe I have some other move in this position, but nothing that was all that convincing. So instead of h4, I opted to simply play knight f5 here. And now the point is that there's no good defence to queen g3 check. The only thing I was thinking during the game is maybe he could try knight e8 and run away with the king. But there must be an easy way to finish this game off. I don't know. Oh, I have a terrible feeling that I'm just missing something really obvious in this position. I mean, if queen g4 check, he can go king here, and he's running away with the king. I mean, of course, this position must be good for me, but okay, I've got bishop check, king e6, knight g7 double check from the queen, and knight, king d6, rook d1, and okay, this looks hideous for black. I mean, okay, there may be easier ways of doing this, I'm not 100% certain, but I don't want to spend too much longer on this game. Instead, but I think black has to try something like that to survive for a few more moves. Instead, he just took on c3 here. But now he loses the knight after queen g3 check. He has to play knight here, but now queen takes g4. And I have the same attack, but he's missing a knight. So instead he goes to h5, and then queen g5 is mate. Okay, so that was the game where I got revenge against Chess.com.